Your team said something's a problem, you just nodded along and moved on. Congrats, you just made a decision based on vibes. A major issue for so many tech teams nowadays is that we no longer know how to prove our point, how to actually show that what we're saying is not just based on feelings and our general impressions, but it's actually real. And that's a major issue as we're progressing, as teams get larger, because people make mistakes. And once we start disconnecting too much from making sure that what we're talking about is founded in reality, too often we just make the wrong decisions. We convince ourselves that something is real even though it isn't. We make the wrong decisions. We invest in the wrong thing. Maybe your team is talking about we need to hire another person, we need to use that service, we have to invest in solving the tech debt over there, maybe the morale is low, maybe the system is slow. All of those might be real and might be genuine issues. But if you just accept those without ever asking, how do we know? Where's the evidence? You're essentially just doing things without ever having the ability to trace back what you're doing to actual results. Sometimes leadership is about learning how we are actually keeping track of things. This video is about evidence-based leadership, how you can play the role of a mini Sherlock Holmes in your organization to ensure that all your efforts and all the work you're putting into things actually traces to real impact and deals with things that are genuinely problems, not something that someone feels like it is. This video will help you cut it with the vibes-based leadership, at least when it comes to these sorts of decisions. By the way, if you're new here, hi, I'm Aviv Ben-Yosef. I'm a tech executive coach and consultant. I help people just like you create teams worth leading, because life's too short to lead mediocre teams. And I think that a major part of that, if you want to create real impactful teams, is to ensure that what we're doing is founded in reality, and we have the evidence to show that we're dealing with real problems, or we have the evidence to show that what we did actually made things better. That's what we're going to be covering. Let's start by reiterating the premise. We are, as an industry, overly indexing on vibes. We have a vibe-based operating system, essentially, where people just come and lament and say, we have an issue with this, we have an issue with that. And sometimes, okay, it's straightforward. You don't need to go for the evidence. You don't need to actually ask them to find a metric to show that this really is an issue. But other times, maybe someone feels that something is slow, but is it? Has it gotten any slower? Is this a new problem? Will hiring another person actually matter here? Or will spinning up a new team to do that will actually solve a material problem? Those are things that too often as someone that works with a lot of startups and a lot of tech companies, I just see these things get thrown around in a meeting and just accept it without anyone taking a second to think, is it? And then a month, 2 or 3 pass, and you see that whatever efforts they did, because they just accepted that as truth, did not result in anything actually improving, or just not as good as it could have, because they ended up focusing on the wrong thing, because they thought that the problem was X when it was actually Y. That stuff matters, and it accumulates and compounds real fast when you look at that at the organizational level, at all the different efforts that you're doing over a year. You have to realize that you can do differently. You can start gaining that evidence so that in the new year, your team will be working much more effectively. Let's start with getting evidence for problems. You're going to be hearing so many people lamenting different problems. That's what engineers love doing. But rather than immediately say, okay, what do you want to do about that? Ensure that there really is a problem. How? Ask, what makes you think that this is a problem? How big of a problem is it? When did this start? It makes a huge difference if this is something that was always there and now you've reached a point where you have to tackle it, as opposed to something that recently became a problem, because then you can trace back and think, what has changed? Why is this now a problem? Is this something that we actually have to now have as a problem because our team is now so big that we have a communication overhead problem that we have to solve? Or is the build suddenly slow? And you're thinking, was it always slow? Like, has it been getting slower over time? Or did something just change last week and Bill pushed a change that now has made it much, much, much slower and we never realized it? We have to ask for the evidence, ask for people to explain how they know that the problem exists. How will they know that they even fixed it? How can they tell us? How big of a problem is it? So we make sure that whatever problem we decide to prioritize is actually worth tackling, is actually a problem. This is something that's basics, should be table stakes for anyone in leadership positions, yet so often we're overwhelmed. We want to let people feel good about whatever problem that they think they see, and we just give them a pass. If one of your senior engineers comes and says that X is a problem, unless right now you really need their time to do something else, so many leaders and tech executives I work with just say, okay, whatever, take half a day, do that. I trust you. And you should trust your people. However, trusting them doesn't mean that you just blindly accept whatever they want. Trusting them means that when you ask them for the evidence and they give it to you, you can trust the evidence. But you still have to teach them how to look for the evidence. And then maybe down the line, once you see that whenever you ask for the evidence, they already come equipped with it, you know that they've learned and you don't have to ask for the evidence. You can see that they already do the proper research and you can trust them even more. But you have to trust that there's enough evidence to actually make the decision. And again, this is not just something that they feel like, they have a sense of, because with all due respect, we all are weird machines that somehow work with our biological weird brains that are indeterministic. We a lot of the time just work irrationally, and that's fine. That's why we're not replaced by LLMs yet. And still, it means that sometimes we just have a feeling that's not based in what's actually happening. And therefore, asking for the evidence, compounded by all the different brains operating in your organization, can really ensure that what we're doing is connected to real life and will probably tackle real valid problems. Next, another type of evidence that you need to be gathering is evidence for improvement, evidence for results. When people say that they did something, ask them, how do they know that it even worked? This actually means that most of the times when we're starting something, when we want to tackle a problem, when we want to tackle tech debt, when we want to make the organization faster, when we want to see engineering velocity improve, when we want to see our customer success, happiness, or customer satisfaction points go up, whatever, we need to start with the metric in mind. How will we even know that we reached it? And this question actually bases the evidence that we're going to collect before and collect after to know what we're doing and whether it's working or not. If you've ever had to do a performance optimization problem, you know that the only way to do it reliably is to start by deciding what is the performance optimization problem. How do we measure it? So we actually have this benchmark that tells me, okay, this is now a problem. This operation is taking 200 milliseconds where it needs to take less than one. I have the benchmark. I'm going to do my changes to the code. I'm going to rerun the benchmark and see, did I actually change it, or am I just going with vibes? You used to see, at least back in my day, I started professionally coding like 20 years ago this year. Back in my day, we used to have these benchmarks, and you'd see people who say, yeah, I changed that from an array to a linked list, and I did this and I did that. And now it's probably much faster. And you check and you realize that whatever they did didn't actually matter, because the code they touched wasn't a bottleneck. And therefore, they did not actually make the code any better. They did not make any optimization. They just made the code actually harder to maintain because they thought they were doing the right thing. This is exactly evidence for coding, but we can ask for the same evidence not just for technical solutions, but also in our teams. If we want to say that what we're doing is going to help us with team morale, with people sticking longer, with people having more ownership, with people being able to participate more, even if your metrics, even if your evidence is going to be somewhat subjective, is going to be somewhat qualitative as opposed to quantitative, that is still better than nothing. That means that at least you're taking a second to say, how will we even know we reached it? Are we just going to go through the motions and hope it works and say it worked without knowing? How will we know we can stop, right? If you have a metric, it means that you can find your end goal, realize that you reached it, even if you still have a month to go, and say, okay, we can stop here. Or we're so pleased, I'm going to continue another month, whatever. But not having that, again, means that we're just doing things on autopilot. We don't actually realize what we're doing, and that's a major issue. Part 3 of evidence is counter evidence. I actually like this. I love playing the devil's advocate. A lot of the times when we're doing postmortems, when we're thinking about our roadmaps, when we're thinking about different innovative approaches, it's good to have someone there who purposefully, deliberately is trying to provide us with the counter evidence, with the counter case. Someone that tries to see how whatever we're assuming might actually not work out, might actually be the wrong thing. This concept of making our people, for a second at least, like, in debate, try to think, what is the counter argument? Why what I'm thinking actually might not work out. If we actually make them do that and make them provide us with the real evidence that someone countering them, someone trying to get them to do the exact opposite would say, not, fillers. I hate it when people just tell me, this might take a bit more time or something, like, that they're just writing or saying it to make it seem like they actually thought about it. Like, this is a counter argument. Yeah, it is, but not the best one. Try to come up with the real best counter argument. That tells me that the team is bringing up approaches and bringing up problems without having too much ego involved, and detach ourselves from the specific problem or from the specific solution. Show the different approaches, show the disadvantages and advantages for each, and then we can make a decision like adults, having had the entire context and not just be given one thing because one person thought only about that and did not think hard enough about the different alternatives. And the last type of evidence you ought to be gathering is external evidence, because within the compounds of your system, of your organization, you only have so much evidence to use, especially if we're talking about things you've never done in the past, about things that maybe are different elsewhere, etc. External evidence is about doing some research and saying, hey, what are others doing? Maybe what we think is a problem based on whatever bar we have, maybe we need to look outside and realize, oh, this is actually, it seems like that's what's happening for everyone. So we're actually at the bar. Or maybe we're proud about what we're doing, but once you get some external perspective, you realize, oh, actually, we're just so because it seems like everyone's getting a lot more ROI for those sorts of changes that they did, or for using that approach or that system. When you don't have the external evidence, a lot of times we're just limited to the local maxima or minima in our teams, and we don't know that we're actually not utilizing something to its fullest potential. This is something that you can get from going to conferences, having peers, getting a mastermind group, working with an external coach like myself. All of those are things that will help you ensure that you're injecting a bit of an external perspective and your team is not constantly breathing its own exhaust, only being aware of what's happening internally and thus missing out what's happening outside. This is something that I see even with the best CTOs I worked with, that for like years, a year or two, they just get blinded, like whores with those blinds, and then they never look to the sides and realize what's happening in the industry. And it's good to have focus, but it also means that when you do it too long, you eventually get disconnected from what's happening outside. And when you eventually realize that, hey, let's look around and see what's happening, you're like, oh, people have changed course. I kept running straight, and you realize there was a shortcut over there. That's something that will happen regularly if you don't learn how to utilize external evidence. And all of this evidence, I can tell you, I've got the evidence working with so many startups, can really help make a team that much more faster, reliable, and focusing on the right stuff. We all have the same 24 hours a day. If we choose the right things based on evidence to tackle, we just might be the winners. That's it for this video. I hope I made you learn a bit about how you can improve your leadership operating system and not just be solely based on vibes. If you like this, please like and subscribe. It really helps. If you have any questions or comments, my email is always in the video description, and also you can use the comments below, and I'll see you in the next video. Ciao.